Welcome back to MediaScience MYTH BUSTING. I'm your host, Philip Lomax, and I'm joined by Dr. Dwayne Varan. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing the myth that fewer ad breaks are better. So Dr. Varan, please give us the context for this research question.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a sequence to understanding this problem. It all starts with the understanding that limited interruption is better, that ads that are in limited interruption are better than ads that are in clutter. And even if not full limited interruption, even that are in relatively short breaks are going to be better than ads that are in much longer breaks. And MediaScience did the research that first pioneered that whole discovery, if you will. But that's now very accepted and very, widely acknowledged. And certainly we've done a lot of research that consistently finds that limited interruption is better. So fine, that's part one. We accept that limited interruption is better. But now let's understand the implications. Once you understand and accept that idea that limited interruptions and relatively short breaks is good, that puts pressure on the network. Because now the network is in a position where they have to get as much of their inventory into relatively short or limited interruption breaks as they can. I mean, the math doesn't work out. You can't take all of those ads and redistribute them that way, but you want to have as many as you can. And so on the network side, what that does is that puts pressure to have more ad breaks because you have to spread out this inventory that you had before, right? So now the network has an incentive to create more ad breaks, and the advertiser's response to that is to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. You may have like shorter ad breaks and you might have limited interruption, but you've got more ad breaks, and that's a bad thing. And so this is what sets up the question that we have today, where the assumption in the market is that fewer ad breaks is better, but that's an untested proposition until we do the research that helps clarify whether or not that's actually true.
Yeah, that's right, Dwayne. And as we decrease our supply of inventory, this will certainly drive up the cost of accessing that inventory, which are brought on to advertisers. So, Dwayne, what has your research shown?
Yeah, no, that's a great point about CPM. You're absolutely right. It drives up costs. So that means that this is not just an issue for the publisher losing out, it's also an issue for the advertiser. Both have a stake in this question. You're absolutely right. So to get at this question of this intersection between shorter loads or limited interruption and frequency of breaks, we did a really very large study. It actually had 10 cells. Here you're looking at a chart which illustrates the study design, and you see that these 10 cells included pre-rolls, no ads, and then basically what we did is either limited interruption or clutter, and then with 2 breaks, 4 breaks, or 6 breaks in the program hour. And let's look at the results here. So first we're looking at the perception of ad intrusiveness. And what you see in this graph is those yellow bars, that's clutter. And any level of clutter was perceived worse as more intrusive than any level of limited interruption. So what that means is that if you had 6 breaks with limited interruption, it was perceived as less intrusive than if you had 2 breaks with clutter. So think about that. That's pretty dramatic. And then in this final cell, this final graph, what we're looking at is now the effect, the ad impact that was associated with this. And what you see is that the limited interruption does better not only than clutter, but even than pre-roll. And so again, any level of limited interruption was outperforming any level of clutter. So again, even 6 breaks with clutter in terms of ad memory was working better than just 2 breaks with clutter. And so what these findings clearly tell us is that the frequency of the breaks is not the issue, it's the length of the breaks that's the issue. So the problem that we should be solving as an industry is the length of the break. And let me add one more thought here, which is that for the advertiser, more breaks also is good for another reason, and that is that we know from a lot of research, not just at MediaScience, but for 50 years of research in this industry, we know that the A position is the optimal position for the ad because the A position wins in terms of the context transfer that's occurring from the program going into the ad break. So that's a premium position. And what more ad breaks mean is that you're getting more A positions in the mix. And so you're further enhancing the capacity of the program to actually contribute to the performance of the ad. So there are a lot of reasons why it makes a lot of sense to have more ad breaks, but shorter ad breaks.
What an incredible case study, Dwayne. Not only have you dissected the architecture of these viewing experiences, but we've also unlocked more premium inventory with the solution. We've also done some incredible work with our partners at Freewheel to continue discovering the optimal viewer experience. Can you speak a little bit about that research as well?
Actually, that's a great point, Philip, and we love the work that we've been doing for Freewheel and Comcast Advertising and the Viewer Experience Lab for them, which we facilitate. And in fact, there are some studies that we've done that are very relevant to the questions that we're talking about today. So for example, in one, we were really looking to see what the optimal length was for a pod. And one of the things that we discovered is that there's not a lot of difference between having 1 minute or 2 minutes. So that's really good. So that means that they don't have to be as short as many networks have them. You could have it up to 2 minutes. But you really don't want it longer than 2 minutes, or at most 2.5 minutes. Because when we look at 2 minutes, for example, versus 3 minutes in terms of the length of the break, an ad occurring in that break at 2 minutes is 2 times more effective on recall than occurring in 3 minutes. That's massive. That's a huge effect. And so really, if you're an advertiser, and if you're placing your ad in an environment where the pod length is more than 2 or 2.5 minutes, you should be demanding a discount because in fact you're actually getting significantly less effect. So in the ideal world, what we would see is that at the very least 2.5 minutes would be the convention and the standard, and you wouldn't have ad breaks that were longer than that. But also ads are a function of the number of ad units. And so that's another problem as well. And one of the things we discovered in the ad experience lab, the viewer experience lab, was that if you keep the ad unit lengths consistent, people perceive that as less intrusive than if you have a mix of ad lengths. So that's another one of those conventions that can help. But again, all of this goes back to the larger point that we're making today, which is that if you have ad breaks that are 2 or 2.5 minutes long, the consequence of that, if you want to maintain something even approximating a similar level of inventory, is that you're going to have more ad breaks, and there would be resistance to that, and we're saying there shouldn't be resistance to it. More ad breaks is okay.
What another killer episode, Dwayne. So on today's episode, we tackle the myth that fewer ad breaks are better. Dr. Varan, what say you?
Busted!
Join us again for our next episode. And until next time, I'm your host, Philip Lomax. This is Dr. Dwayne Varan, and thank you, our audience.